So with the base cut out, I've moved on to the top. I've already cut out all the parts. I'm not going to show that. That's just kind of redundant and boring. If you're following along and building at home, you have a CNC and you're doing it your own way. But let's come in here for a little closer look. There's a couple things I want to point out. Okay, as you can see here, the segments alternate. There's one that sticks out, one that sticks in. Exactly the same shape, just this one has been cut back to a shorter length. That creates different splines here too. On one side we have this, on the other side of the joint we have that shaped spline. Now where this is a center hub and it has a spline too. Let me do a breakdown on that here. I did not want to make a piece like this, a round piece, and then go over to the router table and route that out. That's close quarters and it's kind of scary. There's a lot of bit there that wants to, it's hard to control. So I cut it out on the CNC in 3 pieces. This ring here, I came back and I put a chamfer on it and it taps in place. It's a nice tight fit. Now I've cut about a 3/8 deep 1/2 inch hole on this side and a little over 1/8, about 3/16 or so on this side. I got about a 1/2 inch dowel. So that creates my spline. Now, one thing to keep in mind though, when you're cutting all these pieces out, is you want these pieces to be level. So just keep that in mind when you're strategizing your cuts and stuff. So now, the segments all have a spline cut in it on 3 sides. This is the face, no spline except for the exits from the sides. To do that, I made a fixture here to use on the router table. These things fit in here, clamp down. Now, since there's 2 sizes of segments here, 2 sizes of these guys, they just screw off and on, and they line up with these dowel holes here. So I will show me routing one of these guys on the router table over there, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to sand all these up to 220, lightly ease these edges, and then we will get into the glue ups. Okay, so I got 2 of these guys sanded up, 2 segments. A note here, I did, right on this sharp point, I took that down a little bit, a little more than, I just wanted to take that sharp edge off there. And the rest of it, I just kind of gave a heavy ease and then kind of softened it. So this is a torsion box that I made years ago. It's as dead flat as I can get it. It's not perfect, but it's very much within the range of what we need here. Because I'm going to clamp this down and keep it flat to the torsion box. If you note, the grain direction is this way on these segments. Same as in the spline. So we have no conflict of grain and glue and all this stuff. And so we can glue that spline in all the way down and feel good about it. Also, I've got these guys. I made on my CNC clamping cauls. They're going to allow me parallel clamping pressure. So, let's get started. Okay, there we have it. Well, I have a good even gap all the way here. I'm registering at the back point here. So we can go ahead and do these in glue-ups of 2 in pairs. And then I've got another clamping fixture that's going to bring the 2 pairs together. And then we will bring the whole fixture together, the whole top together, rather. So I've got 2 of these sub-assemblies glued up. Together they'll make a half, and we're going to do that essentially similar to how I did the first glue up, this one. We're going to have CNC made cauls, clamping cauls on either side. Let's see, there we go, like that. There is a difference. I've put a little piece down here, a plate, metal plate, so I can clamp this direction, move this all right into the hub here. And I've got a third clamping caul for the top up there. So, and be aware, this time we're using a different spline, not the one that we did on these sub-assemblies here. So, let's get started. Okay, so I'm ready to bring these 2 halves together. This is the point where you might find some discrepancies. When you pull them together, dry fit them, there may be little gaps. These guys may be a little large and preventing it from pulling all the way in. There's a remedy for that. Another CNC made jig. These guys go on here, and I like to just put little pieces of veneer or something in there to push them out and make it a little narrower. Run it over the router table with a flush trim bit. These little bitty toggle clamps are Linsery GH-201. That's Linseray. They're itty bitty. I will put a link to them in the description. Also, if you can use this, or you can just go to the spindle sander and sand down these edges too until you get a fit, until you close it all up. As you can see, I've got these guys. This is how I'm going to pull it together, clamp it, and then put some cauls on here, some straight cauls to keep the glue up flat. Let's go ahead and get started. There it is. So each leg of the cocktail table has two faux through tenons. One down here is just a rectangle, straight line. This one up here is on a curved surface. Right now I'm concentrating on these guys down here. So I'm going to go through it very quickly. Let's go back to the machine room and I'll go through my process starting there. So I've started off with making blank stock like this. It's just 3, 4, 5 thousandths over the size of the opening in both directions. I went over to the table saw, squared that edge up. This is 220 grit on the belt sander here. This guy here has been squared to the belt. And so I'm going to start the process by getting a 220 grit on the end of that piece of wood here. I have a 1/4 inch round over bit in there, like that, but it's not going the full height. I don't want a full round over, I just want to start kind of a doming process, but kind of a shallow dome. Let me go ahead and run one, then I'll give you a close-up of how shallow I'm getting, and it's not scientific, you can just eyeball that sort of setting. So this is a part of my process that you don't necessarily have to do. I just find it speeds things up. I have an 8-inch variable speed buffer here. This one happens to be Palmgren brand. Baldor makes one too. This one happened to be cheaper. The Baldor one is probably a little better quality. I don't know. This is a Mac mop from Klingspor, 180 grit. In order to mount the Mac mop to the variable speed buffer, you need this guy right here, a flapper adapter. I will put all these things in the description and links to them. So what I'm going to do here, there's machine marks in here and stuff, and you can see lines. I'm taking those out and kind of smoothing things over. I'm going to turn this guy on and go up to, I find 1100 seems to be a good speed. So 10, there we go, 1100. Turn on my, there we go. You can see I've just kind of evened things out a little bit. I'm still going to go over to the bench with 220 and 320. So if you did not use a sanding mop as I did, you might want to start this process with 150 grit and even out this top, take all the little facet lines out and just get it as smooth as possible. The mop basically did that for me. I'm going to start with 220 grit. That's a quarter sheet, tri-folded. Just going to do this business. Kind of a shoe shine affair. If there's anything the mop did not take out, I will go back and get it. Now I've got my thumb backing up the sandpaper. Just going to get those ends there. Same thing, we got 320 grit now. 320 grit, this all starts to come alive. The grain really starts to pop out. Now with the 320 grit though, I'm going to come back and dull the sharpness on those edges. 320 grit won't round over so much as just dull what's already there. And I don't want to round over, I just don't want a sharp edge. So there we are. I'm going to take this back to the table saw, cut this guy off. The depth is going to be, the length of the cut is going to be just a little bit less than the depth of the mortise, maybe 30 seconds less or so. And then we'll come back over here, back bevel, and insert this guy into the mortise. So with a sharp chisel, going to back bevel. It doesn't have to be precise. We just want an easier go of getting this guy into the mortise. So I like to use a toothpick to spread glue inside the mortise. Sometimes a brush is just a little clumsy and gets glue on the outside. It looks like I came really close right here to doing that, even with the toothpick. Okay, now my trusty plastic-headed mallet, and gentle tapping, a little bit at a time, not to get too carried away. There it is. So now we're on to this upper through faux tenon, where the leg swoops out up at the top here. That presents some more challenges with that shape. I have made up a fixture here. I'll go into that later, back when we get into using it. This was made on my CNC machine, drawn up in my CAD program. And theoretically, the little piece that goes in here should fit perfectly. But there is one variable. That variable being that we routed this with a handheld router. And so if we didn't stop at the line just exactly where it was supposed to go, that causes some differences. And if you remember right, you routed from one surface and then from the other surface to put it right dead center. That did center this mortise just exactly in the center. But if you didn't quite hit the line with one of those routes, you got a little nub right here. So let's zoom in a little closer here. This one has a little nub, and I will show you how I take that out. It's a very simple process. Small chisel. There we go. So this is the stock for the upper faux tenon. I have machined it just a little thinner than the opening, than the width of the mortise. I want this guy to slide in a little easier. I feel this piece is a little more fragile. I don't want any chance of cracking it as I'm pushing it in. The length here, the width here, the length of the mortise is exactly what it should be. So let's talk about the workings on this end of the fixture. You can see I have a series of dowels here. That registers this, the stock. If by chance I messed up and I have a mortise that's too big for this, then I can pull these dowels out, put them over here on these dowels, and register a larger piece in there. So let's go ahead and get the process started. This is that 1/4 inch round over, the same thing we did on the lower one. And again, we're not going a full round over, same thing. We're just gonna leave a flat spot in the middle, just kind of start that dome over. And again, the same process as with that lower faux tenon, 1100 RPM. And same as before, I'm starting with 220 grit. And same as before, if you did not use a flap wheel of some sort, you may want to start down at 150, maybe even 120, depending on how rough it is. Okay, 320. And again, take the sharpness off, but I'm not going to work the ends because the router's going to take that away in a minute here when we size it up, and I'll work the ends after we've got it sized to the opening. So this end of the fixture cuts this guy off here. I need to put him in there, pencil mark him, and then I will go back to the bandsaw, cut him off, and I'll be right back. Okay, let me explain how this guy works. This end right here registers right up against there until you can feel it's even. What I'm going to do is I'm going to route that flush, and I'm going to come around this corner. This is why this big open space here is. That allows that bit to circle around if I need to. I do one end, and then flush it up at the end. Do the other. Now, if I need to shorten this guy, I will come back and I'll push him down that way, just a little bit where I can feel the overhang, route again, and keep doing that until I have a good fit. Theoretically, I shouldn't have to do that, but you know, there's always variables. Okay, the moment of truth here. Fits in easily. Now, I know it's going to show up odd on the video here, but I come back with a little flashlight and look in there because that's in the shadows, and I want to make sure there's no gaps. And we do have a really good fit. So now I need to take these ends down. Just bear those in right there. Let's go do that. Okay, I like to use a small rasp and flatten that out just a little bit. And then 220 grit. And then 320. And at 320 I will go down right here and take that sharp edge off. I'll come back and take the sharp edge off there as well. And then I'll do the other end. And like before, I'm going to use a toothpick to apply glue. Oh, and just a little bit on there. I'll get that off. It's hard to keep these things clean of glue. And this guy bottoms out so I can get glue on the bottom in there. Okay. Oops, I got a little ooze out down there. The clean brush, get rid of that glue. So what was not obvious to me when I was looking at it with the little flashlight was this gap right here. Very obvious in the video. So that's a lesson to look at things from all angles, which apparently I did not do. Even though I had light on it, I didn't see it. So let's repair it. I'm going to use this stuff. It's a latex putty, dark tone, walnut. This brand isn't particularly have anything special going for it. It's just what I had on the shelf. There's others as well. So I like this latex stuff because it wipes off with water, and sometimes it takes a couple tries, a couple applications rather, because it will sink and shrink. But let's turn the camera off and we'll come back to that after it's dried. Okay, we have it dried now. Taking 220 grit. That was a fairly small gap, so it didn't take any, it didn't take multiple applications. Very simple. There we have it. So this is the inlay pieces that go at the top of the leg, those triangle guys. You can see I've cut them out on Magasser ebony, and I've cleared away all the material around them. The reason being, I want to be able to pillow them, and I want to get in around. I don't want any obstructions. I'm going to show you how I pillow one of them, and then we will go over to the bandsaw and slice it off. This is a number 13 Lagier rasp. Probably pronouncing Lagier wrong. Just leaving a high space in the middle. I don't know if you can see it, but right there it's a flat spot. Nothing's been eating away at it. Okay, now I'm going to start with, this is a real soft material, just almost sponge-like. 150 grit. .220 grit. .320 grit. Okay, now with the 320, I'm going to come back in and knock the sharpness out of those edges, those corners. And I'm going to finish it off with 600. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do all the rest of them off camera, and then we'll go back to the bandsaw. So I want these guys about a 32nd proud of the surface. So I've set the saw up to accomplish that. So you take the depth of the cutout for these guys, add a 32nd, that's what I've got here. Let's go ahead and cut them. So next I'm going to treat the back side of these with a little bit of sandpaper. Just take out any irregularities off the bandsaw. That last one that came through, it had a little catch on the end. All that needs to be evened out. Now these things, I cut them out to where they're just a couple thousandths under the size of the opening. Just barely. Not enough to show a gap really, but enough to make them go in easily. But to aid that, I'm just also going to do this slightly. It doesn't take much. Just, and it's not really so much a bevel, but it is maybe a micro bevel. I find that they go in easier if I just slightly round over those edges. Okay, let's go over and put one of these guys in. Start with a little glue in here. Okay. Probably don't need it, but I'm gonna put a clamp on there for a short time anyway. See if we get any ooze out when I squeeze down on that guy. We're good, we'll let that set. As you can see, I've already made and installed the ebony pegs. I'm not going to go into them on this video. I have a previous video, a series of videos actually, on YouTube that goes deeply into ebony pegs. I will put that link in the description if that's information you need. The reason we're at the table saw here is I want to check to see if we've got 4 legs hitting the ground at the same time. In this case, the table saw. The table saw is a relatively flat place. Do not trust your shop floor or just a floor in the house. Do something known flat like the table saw top. The way I check is I grab sides and I try to see if I can get a rocking motion. If say I got the rocking motion when I grabbed these two and it was rocking back and forth like that. That means either this or this leg or both of them were high and material needs to be removed from them. I like to do this as well if I have a high point. It tells me where it's touching on those high legs and which one or both. I take it back to the bench, put it in a big vise, use a block plane, remove material, come back, do this test again. Keep doing that until you eliminate the rocking. Then you've got a flat leg surface there. Okay, so I've also installed these guys. These are what attaches the top to the legs. On this side, up here, there's 2 screws going down. On this side, there's also 2 screws going up into the top. Before we apply finish, we need to go back one more time and check for scratches and dents. Along the way, lots of stuff can happen. I have a video on using raking light and how to steam out scratches and dents. I will put a link to that video as well. For the finish, that's undetermined yet. I'm going to be experimenting on this mahogany one, Honduras mahogany, and I'll do another short video and talk to you about what I came up with, what the finishing formula ended up being. So I have put the finish on all 3 of these guys and attached the tops. Let me go through some of that. Let's come in here and look down here and I'll talk about attaching the tops. So every other segment of the top sticks out proud. That's the one that I use to line up the legs. Otherwise, there won't be much of a margin here. So take that highest point on those segments and line up the leg with that. And then run your screws and you're done. So for the finish, on the walnut ones, I use the Libos Kunos Natural Oil Sealer, 3 coats of intensive cherry, followed by 2 coats of countertop oil, Libos. I really like the way these turned out. The little sample I made didn't give me any indication of how much I was going to like these. Now the Honduras mahogany one, I've been struggling with Libos to find a good finish for Honduras mahogany. Kaya, African mahogany, or Sapili, I love the finish I can get with Libos. Not so much with Honduras. This one I use the Libos Kunos natural oil sealer, 1 coat of black bean, 2 coats of cocoa bolo, followed by 2 coats of the countertop oil, Livos. Had I known how well the finish was going to turn out on the walnut ones, I would have made all 3 of my tables in walnut. This one I'm keeping. I would love to have kept a walnut one because they look so much nicer than the Honduras mahogany. The camera just doesn't seem to give it justice. I've tried and tried to get the color coming up and showing you what it is, but I'm just not that good of a photographer, I guess. But I can't get the color just right. So this has been a fun little project. I hope you enjoyed it. And it's kind of, I'm still searching out that balance of how much to video versus just plow on through it. My issue is I really like to get into a project and just go for it. And if I have to stop on every little detail and shoot video, it slows it up, slows down my enthusiasm. But I do like to show some details and get into things that I think might be important. Other things were like some of the joinery. Most of you probably have your own way to do joinery, so I omitted some of that. Anyway, let me know in the comments how you think I did with that balance, and we'll see you next time.